In that case, we will start now and then just hope that whoever shows up later will show up anyways. So we'll start with roll call. So delegate of Bolivia, present and voting. And voting. And voting. Present, okay. Kazakhstan. Japan. Italy. China. Sweden. Ukraine. France. United States. Russian Federation. United Kingdom. Okay, now that we all have new batteries on these things, we can try to use them again, but just saying. So the quorum today is 7 people with a simple majority of 4. There are 6 people present and voting, which means that there can only be 1 abstention in the final vote unless more people show up. This also means that since all of the P5 members declare themselves as present and voting, either a resolution will pass with the consensus of the P5 members, or no resolution will pass given that they cannot abstain anymore. Are there any points or questions right now? No. Okay. I will re-upload the latest versions that I have for the both draft resolutions, just that everybody knows which documents we're talking about. Okay? Okay, does everybody see the documents uploaded on Facebook? Okay, well, if you do, those are the 2 draft resolutions that have been introduced, and those are the documents that we will be working with the next session or 2 sessions. So just to clarify, everybody should be reading those documents right now, even if you have read them already, just so that you refresh your memory. And delegate of Ukraine, are you present or present and voting? Present and voting. I do have to mark you as late, unfortunately, but that doesn't really matter to me, as you know, but I do have to keep a record of it. Neither of those two resolutions has been adopted. The resolutions that have been adopted are the one implementing the task force. We've accepted the one that is task force for alpha data, and I don't remember the other one now, but we also adopted one more. And the one regarding the special envoy. So the two resolutions accepted are the envoy and the piece of mission in the port. But no, neither of the two that have just been uploaded by me have been accepted. So, delegate of Ukraine, do you have a computer with you? Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, you can just use mine, or I can get it printed. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody still need a couple of minutes to keep reading? Okay. Does anybody still need a couple of minutes? You all, okay. Then Sweden and Japan. Sweden. We are reading the 2 draft resolutions. Yeah, the last ones that I've updated on the Facebook group. And I do need to know if you are either present or present and voting. So just 1 second, I need to open the document again. Sweden, Japan. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I'll update the quorum now. So we have a quorum of 10 people, meaning that simple majority will be 6. We have 9 presents and voting, given meaning that there can only be 1 abstention. And I will repeat again for those who weren't here, neither of the P5 members that are here oh wait, they're all here. Neither of the P5 members declare themselves as present, meaning that they cannot abstain from the final votes, which essentially means that there can be either a unanimous approval and consensus by the P5 or a veto on the resolution. There can be no abstentions by that. Okay, I'll only be granting 1 more minute, and then we'll go into on the next part. Okay, so if you haven't finished reading yet, I'm sorry, but we've had already 15 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with one of the blocks, and we're going to allow people to ask questions to the sponsors of the first draft resolution, and then we'll do the same for the second draft resolution. So is there any volunteer? Does either of the two draft resolution blocks want to start first? Russia and China. So given that this will be a Q&A, please stand at the front. You may take your computer so that you can have your, yeah. So we're going to have questions now. So I do expect to hear everybody ask at least one question. And then there's many things that I already found, but I hope that you ask the questions, not me. So as soon as you're ready. Perfect. So any delegates wishing to ask a question, please raise your placards. United Kingdom.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thanks also to the delegates of the People's Republic of China and Russia for being here and answering all our questions concerning their draft resolution. Therefore, I'd like to start by asking the delegates in regard to clause number 2, which calls upon all sides of the conflict to allow a peacekeeping force facilitate the reopening continuing operation of the ports of Aden and Al-Hodeida in the airport of Sana'a. So my first question is concerning the peacekeeping force, as we agreed that a peacekeeping force, which is also considered to be an armed force, is solely based in the port of Hodeida, and therefore, how do you answer to that in regard to the port of Aden? Thank you.
Thank the delegate for his question. In response to that, circumstances have changed significantly since this resolution was drafted. So with the permission of the delegate from the People's Republic of China, perhaps this particular clause could be either rewritten or withdrawn entirely. I think there's still a case to be made for efforts to reopen the airport at Sana'a, but given that the Houthi rebels who are in control of that airport have already given over access to Al-Hodeida as a peacekeeping force, I'm as yet unaware if they'd be willing to make the same concessions on the airport at Sana'a, or if perhaps a more appropriate measure would be a similar one to that has been adopted in Aden, whereby it's simply a monitoring mission or an implementation mission rather than a military force, if the delegate of China agrees.
You just do want to clarify something because on that clause. So there is a continuous operation on the port of Aden that is not hindered by any side. The port of Al-Hodeida, there is the United Nations verification and inspection mechanism, which has significantly reduced the number of delays and obstacles created by the coalition, although they do continue to use it, especially because the Saudis say that any object that they deem to have a dual civilian military use, there is a continuous operation on Al-Hodeida, it's just that there are obstacles. And the airport of Sana'a, that is completely closed to humanitarian aid. So just to clarify the situation of all of this. Now the situation in this room would be that Al-Hodeida, given that it is now under the control of United Nations inspectors with a peacekeeping force as well, that should probably have also reduced the problem of the coalition blocking ships, given that there is people on the ground. The port of Aden also has inspectors, so the real problem would be only the airport and other smaller ports along the Red Coast. And there are solutions to that have been proposed that have gained traction. And I think it was actually in the real United Nations, a delegate of the United Kingdom who proposed them. But you should be able to find them online. If you don't worry, I will suggest it because it is something that I want to see in the final draft resolution. Delegates wishing to ask any question, please raise your placards. Delegate of France.
Okay. Apparently, France also was a bit confused by the clause number 2, because yesterday we adopted a resolution where we stated that the UN mission will be in Aden, while peacekeeping forces will facilitate only in Al-Hodeida. But since there was a comment that the things changed during a day, and the France wanted to clarify and encourage to add the clause that states that to prevent any form of financial support to Houthis, which is pretty much mentioned within the drafted resolution of United Kingdom, USA, and that is helps to further destabilize the political and social environment in the states, since we are as a Security Council for the legitimate government of Yemen. Thank you.
The writers of the draft resolution appreciate the suggestion of the delegate of France, and you're all very welcome to now work together on a joint approach to find a solution. And while we think that it's very important to stop further support for rebels and terror organizations, the difficulties of implementing an asset freeze for the Houthis is to identify the key actors first. So far, we adopted in the past resolutions already asset freeze for those who are in charge and those who are already blacklisted, as we did just earlier this year. However, as soon as the delegate of France has any further suggestions for people or organizations that support the Houthis and should be put on the list for asset freeze as well, you're more than welcome to amend it, and can count on the support of the People's Republic of China and I guess of the Russian Federation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. With the chair's permission, I just wanted, I haven't had a chance to talk this through with the delegate of the People's Republic of China, which I ought to have done, but I wondered if I could perhaps preempt some of the next questions that are coming with my own comments on the resolution.
I would rather have questions finished and then you can have well, actually no, let's have the comments first. Yeah.
Just in my brief assessment this morning, in light of new facts, particularly the incident or the new reality on the ground in Al Hodeida and in Aden as of yesterday, I believe that clause 1 of our resolution still requires action. We have yet to pass a resolution urging states to make up the shortfall of the money requested by Undersecretary General Stephen O'Brien. As I see it, as the delegate of the United Kingdom and the delegate of France have already pointed out, number 2 has already been addressed and so is open to either withdrawal or a rewrite. Number 3, the same can be said, considering that a ceasefire was part of the resolution we passed yesterday on Al Hodeida. Number 4, in light of opposition from the United States and the United Kingdom, the wording of number 4 is perhaps problematic, particularly given its reference to third nations in providing military support. However, there is a case to argue that part of the agreement yesterday was that Saudi Arabia would temporarily cease its military action in Yemen. So that is something that we will welcome comments on. Number 5 is not yet addressed in terms of the specific things we can do to target humanitarian conditions. Number 6 is at the moment, I believe, addressed, considering that we have given a mandate to the panel of experts in conjunction with the Secretary General and others to conduct peace talks within, I think we passed 1 month perhaps in the end, although the details escape me. And briefly, number 7, I believe, has been addressed in terms of the reopening and the assured opening of the ports at Aden and Al Hodeida. And number 8 is as yet unaddressed in terms of perhaps more targeted resolution or points on Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So those are my comments so far. If delegates have a response to that, then I welcome them.
Does any delegate have any questions? Delegate of the United States.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to ask about the paragraph number 4. So you're still sticking to it or reconsidering it about the third parties?
Thank you, Delegate of France, for mentioning it. As our fellow delegate of Russia just told us, this is open for discussion. We definitely consider rewriting it, since we are all interested in finding a resolution that actually passes. So this term of third nations should be defined further. However, we still think that it is important to limit the amount of armory and weapons flowing in the country, as this is something that you address in your resolution as well. And we are confident that we find a common solution that we all can agree on. So yes, this is open to for amendments.
Are there? Yes. There.
As far the France understands the format. If we adapt and this resolution passes, we're not going with the voting for the second resolution. Yeah.
Given that we are following UN rules instead of the standard MUN rules, we can have multiple draft resolutions pass. So it makes no sense to have two draft resolutions on exactly the same issue. But it could be possible that you split this into two draft resolutions. For example, one dealing specifically with the question of ACAP and ISIL, and the other dealing specifically with the question of the ceasefire and humanitarian aid. So that is possible to have two draft resolutions. I wouldn't welcome to have two draft resolutions on the exact same question. I would prefer to see either one of the resolutions merged, both the resolutions merged into one third resolution that again gets passed, or one of the resolutions being amended until it includes the ideas of the second resolution. But it is possible for us to have two draft resolutions.
But apparently the resolutions contradict each other, so...
Usually you would try not to contradict each other.
Okay.
Are there any? Yes, Delegate China.
So the delegate of China thinks that the contradiction in these draft resolutions are also due to the different situations we had just a few months or weeks ago, or respectively yesterday. However, under the new light of the port of data to be free and the Saudi coalition not threatening to bomb it anymore, we are confident that we can all agree on a new draft resolution, and think that is the beauty of comprehensive and concise UN documents, to find one common draft resolution that we can finally adopt, and again welcomes more than any effort from other countries to work together on a joint approach for a third merger.
You Delegate of Ukraine.
Good morning, everyone, the Honorable Chair and their distinguished delegates. The delegate of Ukraine want to consider about the number of the clause 4, which is mentioned about the third nation. I would like to ask that we are here to solving the conflict, and my question is for the Republic of China and Russia Federation that by avoiding the conflict, and in here you mentioned about to including the third nation support the conflict and the military for the both side, it doesn't seem like bringing peace over there. It more seems of war and conflict between the foreign countries to using their foreign policy to that country.
I thank the delegate for her comments. The situation, I think most delegates would agree, in Yemen has been worsened and exacerbated by the involvement of third nations, such as allegedly, and I don't wish to repeat rumors in this council, but allegedly countries have been supporting the Houthi rebels, and more overtly there's been the Saudi-led Gulf Cooperation Council coalition in favor of the Hadi government. So I think there's a case to be argued that third nations being involved in this conflict has made it worse. That is not to say that we should abandon the two sides to fight it out between themselves without some form of international framework within which to resolve their differences. So as we've stated previously, this is certainly one of the clauses that we would be more than happy to have consultations to amend.
Thank you very much, but I want to be more clarified about that. To bring the peace in a one nation, first of all, we should make them united, which is they have two parties over there. They're not united. So our duty is to make them united and make them one nation. But we are not doing that. Instead of that, we are making them two parties, and from both sides, we are supporting them with the military bases and with the troops and all that. It is like we are giving them the troops to hate on each other. Do you really think so? By supporting them by military and dividing them into two parts and supporting by third nation and giving them all the facilities of the military bases to fight with each other? In my case, if we don't, in my opinion, if we don't support them with the troop and with the military bases, they cannot be fighting with each other and to make the war more and more. We should not support them with the military bases, and also we should not support them to bring the peace. We should make them more united and finish the conflict inside the country in order to interfere the third nation inside there and to make the conflict and the situation more over by using the other aims of another country to make the place as a war zone.
Again, thank you, Delegate of Ukraine, for this extensive explanation. And just let me try to rephrase it. What we intend to do with it, with the chance for the Delegate of Russia to add his thoughts. This is mainly about the arms embargo. So you're totally right that most important is to secure peace and to find ceasefire, as we have already done, and we need to secure this ceasefire and have it as a long-lasting solution. However, the Delegate of Ukraine also wants to remind you that there are not only two sides fighting each other, but we have terrorism there as well, and the country has to be able to defend itself against the terror threats as well. So the providing weapons doesn't technically mean only that there are two sides hitting on each other, and at the same time we have the arms embargo already, which is implemented, but not for the governmental troops, as the government need to have a chance to be prepared for threats such as ACAP, such as ISIL. So while we totally support the peace and the ceasefire and a long-lasting secure Yemen, a long-lasting unified secure Yemen, we still think that unfortunately in a world of terror, there still need to be weapon deliveries to prepare this nation for threats from outside.
Delegate of Ukraine, this is no longer a Q&A, that's already a discussion. So I will be willing to allow a secondary speakers list on that specific clause later, but I will not allow more comments right now, given that there are more questions. United Kingdom.
Thank you, and thanks to the delegate of China for explaining that a little bit more. And I just can ensure my support for that point of view, that actually to, in the long term, stabilize Yemen, it is surely needed that the legitimate government of Yemen will also in future get supported with the necessary arms and related materials. And in that regard, especially to be able to fight terrorist groups like ISIS or ACAP in the region. Therefore, I also have one question concerning clause number 3, which demands the ceasefire on all parties. You already mentioned, the delegate of Russia, that it might need some rewriting. In that regard, I would like also to emphasize or to ask you in how far groups, which I just mentioned, like ISIS, are included or should not included from your point of view in that ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you to the delegate of the United Kingdom for his question. This clause will require a rewrite, as he rightly points out, to emphasize that this is, by all parties, the references to the two opposing sides in the overt conflict between the Yemeni government, the legitimate government of Yemen, recognized by all nations in this room, including my own, against the Houthi rebels and the Saleh alliance. With regard to the fight against terrorist groups such as ACAP and ISIL in Yemen, this is not the time to demand a ceasefire in that conflict, in the sense that they've shown, unlike the parties to the more overt civil war, the terrorists have shown no desire to negotiate, to cooperate. So in this sense, the protection of civilians warrants military action to continue against terrorist groups within Yemen. So, as I've suggested with almost all of these clauses, it's welcome for a rewrite which will be more specific.
Delegate of Japan.
the delegation of Japan wanna clarify one point of this resolution, because when we starting writing this resolution, we understand that we can't support any side in this conflict. But we see that we support legitimate government for combating ISIS, as I understand. Well, yeah. But the problem that we must to guarantee that these arms don't use for fighting against Yemeni rebels and also against Houthis, because we can support legitimate government, but in the end we have a situation when one side don't fight against ISIS and AKAP. It's fight again against Yemeni rebels, and in the end, we haven't any negotiations with these people, because they have reflection to our acts.
I thank the delegate of Japan for his comments, and his country's long-term commitment to peace is recognized and is admirable. What I would say in response to that is that the primary duty of this council is to ensure the international peace and security, and within that, operating within the founding principles of this organization, which is the respect of state sovereignty. So with respect, and I do to an extent agree with his comments, that the international community being seen as taking one side against the other is not always a healthy one. But in a case where a legitimate government is threatened and their position is threatened, there is a case, I believe, to support that legitimate government in its fight to maintain its sovereignty over its territory. I think the delegate of China will have comments on that as well.
And the delegate of China, just let me add that still this resolution, this draft resolution, is in alliance with the resolutions we have adopted already. So we still have the peace talks going on, moderated by the panel of authors, moderated by the special envoy in Yemen. So we have their interest, and we have also our stakes in there to guarantee a peace between both sides. However, the weapons belong to a legitimate government, and as just the delegate of the Russian Federation said, they're not anymore in our responsibility, and this is not anymore that we can influence, as we need to respect the national sovereignty.
Thank you for explaining the resolution, but I have some comment. I can say that regarding clause number 6, we had multiple. We will hope that our peace talk will have some outcomes, but he's saying that with representatives of two parties, Houthis and the Yemeni government, we can somehow come to negotiation, diplomatic negotiations. But what is the measure when one party is not coming? Is it going over time? When we want to make some negotiation, some parties, one of parties is not coming. What are the measures and the consequences?
Thank you, Delegate of Kazakhstan, for this question, as this addresses a big threat in terms of the peace talks that we already addressed in the resolution we adopted just yesterday. So, like the delegate of Russia said, the clause number 6 is open for withdrawal or amendment, as we already have adopted a very similar resolution. The possibility of one side to change its opinion is given. So there is this threat. However, we realize that both parties have an interest in the peace as well, and have an interest in a joint solution as well. So we hope that with the support we offer, also with the support, for example, of the UN missions in the ports of Aden, in the ports of Hodeidah, the interest for both parties to find a way to settle the weapons to find a ceasefire and to settle together for a peaceful solution are so much given that we do not need to fear one side to withdraw their commitment to the peace talks.
Delegate of France, and that will be the last question.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Dear sponsors of this resolution, I wanted to talk about the clause number 4 regarding the...
We've had too many questions on clause number 4, so I'm going to rule the question dilatory.
Okay, okay. I just want a small comment, okay? Okay. The comment is that we're saying that there is include third nations providing military support to either sides of the conflict, while we do not recognize any sides, any third nations supporting Houthis. Yeah. So and the all support is going through the different organizations, and in the shadow, how the Security Council maybe need some kind of mechanism to recognize that supporting third nations or organizations and sanction them. Then the clause number 8, we are talking about the recruiting and radicalization process of terror organizations, but and mentioning only Al Qaeda and ICAP, and France encourages to add ISIS because the ISIS is more related with recruiting now. Thank you.
Please.
That's better. The Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China would be willing to accept an amendment to include ISIS in clause 8.
Thank you. Please take a seat, delegates. Jana, can I get some water, please? Thank you. Okay. We will now do the same thing for the other draft resolution. So, delegate of UK and I believe USA.
Is it possible that the two delegates first mention whether there are any, just like the delegate of the Russian Federation, whether there are any clauses irrelevant anymore?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll start with comments by you two. Keep it brief within the 3-minute margin. But yeah, just make any comments you feel necessary before the questions.
Thank you. And in this regard, I can just agree with the delegates of China and Russia that because the situation on the ground changed enormously, I suppose that some points also in that resolution draft are open to change. Well, if we have a look, for example, at the first point, which is in that case also concerning a weapon embargo, we already are open to rephrase it, especially when it comes to the transfer of arms and related material of all types, as that caused some disturbance. I think we can maybe make it more clear that this is intended solely on weapons and directly related material. And therefore also we talked about the second clause already, which as we know was more or less already voted against 2 years ago by the UN Security Council. So therefore, we still believe that it's important to strengthen the weapon embargo, but it would be probably a more unified solution if we could, instead of the Saudi Arabia, the coalition of Saudi Arabia, or other combined maritime forces, launch a mission under under the lead of the United Nations. Therefore, we also have some proposals concerning some amendments, especially when it comes to the sanctions. And here we would also like to emphasize that from our point of view, it's important that particularly the analytical support and sanctions monitoring team will be included in that, and to cooperate with the sanctions committee. And we would also like to emphasize that, of course, all parties involved in Yemen have to cooperate closely with the panel of experts and ensure the safety of the members of the panel of experts was in what was in the past, as we know, already a great problem with attacks on the special envoy. But I think now we are open for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And the delegates wishing to ask a question, please raise your placards. You have comments? Yeah.
Thank you very much. The delegation of the United States also wants to emphasize the parts 3 about the preventing any form of financial support for Houthis. So basically, some of you should disagree about this, that such ban was already implemented in other resolutions in forms of sanctions. However, according to some UN reports, Houthis still could be able to find other flexible methods of finding resources for themselves. So this paragraph is also open for reconsideration, and we're rephrasing. So basically, we are going to propose the paragraph about regularly updating list of individuals who are the subject to measures of paragraph 11 and 15 of Resolution 2140 about the sanctions. So it's basically open to discussions. It's not the final one. So that's all.
Thank you. Just so you know, yesterday there was an article that says that it's a Saudi article, and the title is Coalition, so the Saudi coalition to support legitimacy in Yemen welcomes UN envoy statements regarding handing over of a data port. So just so you know, what you did is actually happening in parallel right now. And hopefully we will get to see that relatively soon. What we probably won't see are Russian troops based there, but you know, if that happens, then you will. I will probably ask you who's going to win the next World Cup and bet on that. Anyways, questions? China.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the two delegates again for really comprehensive and a comprehensible draft resolution. And we are confident that we will find a joint approach that we can all agree on, especially on this basis. However, we have a question regarding clause number 5. While we think that it's important to hold consultations and to find an approach that considers all stakeholders in this issue of the Yemen civil war, we were wondering how exactly you want to implement consultations with concerned member states. What are concerned member states? So just the neighboring countries, everyone who's trading with Yemen, or everyone who has people of his own population there? And what exactly do you mean by ensure full implementation of the measures? So this seems a bit vague, and it would be beneficial if you could clarify that. Thank you.
Thanks to the delegate of China for his question. Indeed, what we are trying to focus on here is especially the weapon embargo and the states which are especially concerned. In that regard, I would like to point out, for example, to Oman. As far as today, the weapon embargo in that regard was unfortunately not as effective as it should be. Same holds true probably for the naval route coming from Somalia. So with regards to Somalia, of course, we are talking about a very fragile situation itself. Still, I would like to highlight that we especially have to take into consideration how these states can ensure that no more weapons will cross the border and how they can participate in that endeavor.
Thank you. Any delegates? Russia?
Thank you, Chair. I have, to start off, I'd just like to express my support, as it were, for clauses 5 and 6, although taking into account the caveats applied by the People's Republic of China. And with regard to some other clauses, one aspect which you've sought to address in your preliminary comments is the enforcement of the arms embargo at sea. We think that the reference, any involvement by Saudi Arabia in this case threatens the neutrality of the process. So I think perhaps the pre-existing mechanism, the verification mechanism that is in place by the UN currently, is perhaps sufficient at this time. Would you be amenable to an amendment that reflected that?
Thanks to the delegate of Russia for that remark. We noticed that unfortunately some member states question the neutrality of Saudi Arabia in that regard, and therefore we also see the necessity to rewrite that clause or make an amendment. And I agree that it is best if United Nations actually are in charge. Nevertheless, I would like to emphasize that probably it would be best to strengthen that mission to ensure that the effectivity in future will also really take place, and we can ensure that the weapon embargo is fully implemented also on the high seas of Yemen.
Thank you. Delegate of Japan?
The delegation of Japan thinks that this resolution is more radicalized against the sides of this conflict, because when we highlight destabilize political and social environment by Houthis, it's dangerous because we want to negotiate with all sides. But in this resolution, we say that some side want to destabilize the political and social environment in the state. Maybe now we not keep neutrality in this resolution, and it's a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, delegation of Japan. So we think that in a previous approved resolutions, we have already talked about the peace talks and encouraging all sides to come to the negotiating table, and emphasizing that all sides kind of demands will be met in adequate manner. So we do not think that we are pushing towards one side or another and abstaining from neutrality. We try to keep neutrality as much as possible. And in this resolution, so basically, this is not final resolution. This is a part of it, and we also, as the delegation of the Russia Federation, China also has other clauses emphasizing other sides of the conflict. And I think that we can cooperate and merge, and then taking into consideration the other resolution that have been approved, I think that we come to a compromise and common resolution. And basically, what we state in this one is that reducing the power and influence of ISIS, for example, and preventing financial support for Houthis that are seizing the legitimate government of Hadi. So we should address this too. And moreover, we are also talking about the panel of experts, basically, which are there for effective assessment of the situation and coming to more or less result-oriented solution. So thank you.
Delegate of China?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this resolution that addresses several important issues. Just for clarification, it would the delegate of China would like to ask regarding clause 6, where you mention the UNMOVIC and the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, and stress paragraph 3, which somehow seem to be 3 different issues. So, is it possible that it's meant to be the UNVIM, or do you really do you mean the UNMOVIC? And if that's the case, could you explain why? And is the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights also the right UN institution to address on this issue, or isn't that rather a separate clause that we should include about the humanitarian situation, while the UNVIM rather is in charge of the arms embargo? And yeah, as I guess it's not paragraph 3, could you also say which paragraph you are referring to?
So thank you very much, delegation of China. Yeah, we basically made a mistake here. So it's not paragraph 3, it's paragraph 5 about the consultations between member states to ensure full implementation of the measures, which you also stress that it's kind of vague, so we'll also work on it. And we also consider your suggestion of including the High Commission of Human Rights into the separate paragraph. So yes, basically.
No more questions? France?
Thank you, Honorable Chair, distinguished sponsors of this draft. France supports the clause number 2, where you mention the coalition of Saudi Arabia. France thinks that we can't avoid the presence of Saudi Arabia coalition within this issue, since it went too deep within this issue, and they helped destabilize the situation within the, since they supported the legitimate government of Hadith within the Yemen, and we disagreed with the clause number 4 of the previous draft resolution, and we need to rephrase or reformulate the clause here, and yeah, we need to go on with the arms embargo against the Saudi, but we cannot avoid the presence of this coalition. Thank you.
Thanks to the delegate of France for his remarks. So I totally agree that, of course, we have to take Saudi Arabia into consideration, as it's not just a reliable and important partner for ourselves, but also for the whole region. And therefore, talks with Saudi Arabia are unavoidable in that regard if we want to come to a peaceful solution in Yemen, for sure. Still, and I think that's what we wanted to highlight with that clause, and what we would also like to rewrite is the importance of the arms embargo in Yemen itself. And therefore, it was the primary idea to implement a naval partnership also in cooperation with Saudi Arabia. Still, we see that it is maybe another solution to still implement a naval partnership, or to strengthen the already existing UN mission in that regard, and to try to keep Saudi Arabia in that regard neutral, so that no member states are concerned about the neutrality of that mission.
Crane?
Thank you very much, delegation of UK and delegation of USA. My question goes to ask about that. What kind of resolution do you prefer for internal political stability of the region. What kind of resolution you can, I mean, what kind of solution do you suggest? Maybe, I hope it's clear. Thank you.
So thank you, delegation of Ukraine. So we, in this resolution, we basically we're concentrating on eliminating some external support. I mean, not external support, external factors that could exacerbate the situation in Yemen. However, to stabilize the internal situation, the delegation of the United States not proposes, but think that the political transition would be one of the main solutions to the problem. However, there are so many uncertainties regarding this political transitions, and there are so many different conflicting goals and aims of the groups involved in Yemen. However, we think that this political transition is probably one of the most effective compared to the situation we have now in Yemen. So we, for now, don't have specific specific kind of criteria that will define this political transition. However, we think that we will also work on that.
Just a very short remark from my side to that. I agree that, of course, we also need to think about the political transition in Yemen. Still, I also want to highlight, with regards to the draft by Russia and China, that also here also already one clause on the adaptation after the adoption of the resolution about the peace talks was implemented. I think we have to make sure that these peace talks will start in the first place and see if all parties can find a common ground and then implement, maybe in the future in another resolution, a more concrete transition for Yemen itself.
Are there any more questions at this point in time? And thank you, delegates of UK and USA. Given that there are many amendments by the proposers of the resolutions and that it is unlikely that two draft resolutions on the same question will pass, I highly recommend an adjournment or suspension of the meeting for a brief period of time to allow, well, all the sponsors of the resolutions to write amendments in cooperation with each other or with any themselves. That's up to you. However, having secondary speakers list on specific clauses is also in order right now. I believe that it would be a bit redundant to have a conversation right now on clauses that are already planned to be amended, and it would be probably better to have the conversation on the clauses after they have been amended. But that is up to you. So are there any points or motions? Delegate of United States. That is in order. Are there any points or motions? Seeing that there are none, we will vote on the motion of the United States. Are there any seconds first? Are there any seconds? Delegate of China seconds the motion. Votes in favor, please raise your placards. Votes against. Then we will have a 15-minute adjournment. Please try to confine yourself to the 15 minutes or we won't have enough time to discuss afterwards. But let's make it 20 just so that we can save the process of extending it 20 minutes, and then we still have 20 minutes of debate. So